evening, I'm Melisa Idris.
And I am Ibrahim. Sani.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Now let's begin with the hunt for Joe Low. Thanks to a Cypriot newspaper, we now know that Joe Low has secured Cyprus citizenship in September of 2015. And this was after he had apparently fulfilled the criteria under the Cyprus investment plan to make a cash deposit in a Cypriot bank of 5 million euros. That's 23 million ringgit. He also purchased a permanent home worth at least €500,000. What do you think about this?
I think it's every right for any country to dispense upon their passports to anybody who's ready to pay.
But surely, okay, I mean, I hear you.
They have to pay for the price, though. I mean, I'm talking about the countries themselves, not the individuals who pay literally the payment. The countries now have to pay for the price for giving passports to fugitives.
What is the price that Cyprus has to pay?
Right now, Cyprus has to pay the price of being the pariah state of the EU. Because we know that Joe Low is on the red notice of the Interpol. We know that Joe Low is a fugitive. And we now know that Joe Low is holding a Cyprus passport ready to be given away upon payment. Okay. And in this case, 5 million euros.
Well, to be fair, the Cypriot government did say that they're now looking at whether Joe Low's passport should be revoked. But this citizenship by investment, I'm really wondering how this happened. Surely, as you mentioned, he's on the, kind of the Interpol list. Surely his citizenship application and his, background checks would have raised some red flags. And if it did raise red flags, then what happened? How come he was still issued citizenship? So, best case scenario for Cyprus, this was negligence. Worst case scenario, there must have been some form of collusion or corruption. Yeah,
of course. But this has been going on for some time now, Melissa. We know that some countries like Antigua and Barbuda, St. Nevitt's and Kitts, Montenegro, Portugal, Spain, many of these countries have a price tag, outright price tag, on you being able to buy passports from these countries. And these are accorded to, say, Pacific countries or Pacific nation countries or those countries that we now know that is, safe haven for financial, scandals. We know many of these countries originate from the Panama Papers scandal.
But as you mentioned, a lot of countries have this type of citizenship by investment. Maybe not full citizenship, but some kind of permanent residency, some form of, allowance when it comes to being allowed to be within their borders. And people have, outs for many different reasons. It could be anything from security to educational opportunities, retirement plans, tax purposes, for sure.
Yeah, but think about this. The final conclusion is, where is Joe Low? Since he can't be in Cyprus, we now know he looks somewhat like a bear.
Apparently, allegedly, he looks like a bear.
Panda bear, polar bear, we don't know. This is according to the IGP, not me.
Okay, so
the IGP said this.
Inspector General Police Abdul Hamid Badr said that Malaysia is facing some hurdles when it comes to securing Joe Low's presence because apparently of uncooperative foreign authorities. So among the excuses we've now heard is apparently Joe Low underwent some kind of plastic surgery to look like a bear. He now walks, apparently. He resembles a wild ox. So is it a beruang? Is it a seladang? We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, and of course, in the meantime, the ongoing, criminal proceedings are still taking place. Very recently, of course, Datuk Seri Najib Tun Razak has been called sick for his eye, but well enough to attend the Tanjung Piai roundabouts or walkabouts.
We'll have to keep a close eye on how that trial develops, of course. Now, moving on to other news of the day, which seems to have some kind of a transportation theme, if you will. So bike-hailing companies will now be allowed to begin operations in Malaysia. Now they're under a pilot project this coming January. According to Transport Minister Anthony Loke, companies like Gojek and Degoride will now be allowed to offer rides under a 6-month proof of concept project. This is to assess the system while waiting for laws to be passed to regulate the bike-hailing industry.
Now, when we had Soka here on this station a few months back, we were talking about what's the reality of bike-hailing car companies or bike-hailing companies taking place here. The CEO of Soka at that time, Leon, was talking about the security of two-wheeled vehicles, be it motorcycles or bicycles, because unlike four four-wheeled vehicles, you can actually take two-wheeled vehicles up a building or down a building, down to the basement. So from the business side of things, it's always problematic for them to roll out these kind of businesses.
You mean someone might steal it?
Someone might steal it, right? Quite literally. And of course, when Dago launched this a few years ago, Dago also ran in trouble with the authorities then, and the government then practically clamped down Dago, but now I guess the appetite is of course a little bit different with this government. So the situation is quite serious whether or not the government is able and willing to do this and authorize companies from executing this particular project.
Well, this should be interesting because within this kind of proof of concept project, we'll be able to see whether there is demand for this and whether the security concerns are valid, because apparently, according to the Malaysian Institute of Road Safety Research, or MIROS, they carried out a survey to kind of gauge road consumers' perceptions on the viability of the motorcycle e-hailing services. I hope everyone participated so that we had our say in whether we feel like this is a security concern. Whether it could be fatal accidents, whether the road conditions in Malaysia are conducive for bike hailing.
But so the question is, are the safety concerns valid,
yes.
right? And according to MIROS, the same analysis that you cited, they found that the risk of motorcyclists being involved in fatal accidents actually were 42.5 times higher compared to a bus and 16 times higher compared to a car. This is statistics telling us things that we already know, that people are going to be significantly more dangerous or at higher risk if they ride a motorcycle. So I don't know whether we can perpetuate this particular health hazard even further.
Well, I think a regulation is key, right? Especially with a new industry like the bike hailing industry. I mean, I guess we're kind of used to car e-hailing services, but when it comes to regulating the bike hailing industry, I think there's this balance to be achieved in enough regulation, but not so much that it stifles. And no industry can be a cowboy town, right? You need to have some kind of regulation to make sure that the public's interest is safeguarded. I think it will be particularly interesting, Ibrahim, to see whether there is demand for this, because as I mentioned earlier, we're so used to the culture.
I think there will be a demand. I think the
car hailing, though.
Car hailing there will be a demand. Bike hailing there will be a demand. There will always be a demand.
You reckon?
Yes, and I'm pretty sure that the moment this goes live and the proof of concept has proven its concept, and I think it will be proven in its concept because the parameters are quite tight. Klang Valley, 18 years old, the vehicle has to be well identified, all that.
The passenger has to be above 18 as well.
Passenger has to be above 18. Once all that is in place, we know for a fact that there's going to be a demand because there's already a lot of motorcycles out there.
Where do you think the demand is going to come from? I have to say, I mean, there are a lot of things that you have to think about changing consumer behavior, right? On a two-wheeler, it's more difficult with bags, it's more difficult with women, for instance, with dressing, with helmet hair, all these, with weather. It's all these conditions that you have to take into consideration.
I think the demand will come from single male travelers, and the single male travelers that we're speaking of can range between B40, M40, and believe me or not, it's going to be from T20 as well. I've seen, and this is a fact, I've seen Datuk Sri Nazir Tun Razak, formerly CEO of CIMB, took a motorcycle ride because he was running late for a meeting. I've seen that happen.
Actually, given Malaysian traffic, Klang Valley traffic to be specific, that might be a kind of a faster way to zip through the congestion. All right, speaking about Malaysians' road use habits, a new survey by the Centre for Governance and Political Studies, or better known as CENT-GPS, has found that over 87% of Malaysians residing in the Klang Valley drive alone to work.
Do you drive alone to work, Melisa?
I drive alone to work, but I carpool with Sharad on the way home. So I drop him off at the LRT station.
So you get half a mark for this particular thing. No, I don't carpool to work. I drive alone to work, and I have my reasons. For whatever reasons there may be, I don't think it's worth.
What reasons are there?
I mean, like convenience. It's actually quite cheap compared to, say, traveling on an MRT and the parking and all that. Our producer in the studio right now is talking about how he has to pay up to 12 ringgit, both in terms of parking as well as the ticket ride itself. That's 12 ringgit per day times 5 days times 4 weeks.
Wow.
Versus, a car.
Okay. All right. So apparently this finding of the survey makes Malaysia the worst in the world in terms of single driver commuter stats. Why is it that we are so opposed in the Klang Valley, so opposed to carpooling? Apparently it has to do with the fact that sometimes we want to, according to CENT-GPS, we want to avoid the chit chat of the car in the car with our the carpool people, or you just want kind of quiet time? What do you think?
There's also another reason that was presented by Cent GPS, which is of course the incentive for them to switch from another mode of transportation is actually quite low, considering that fuel price is relatively cheap in this country versus other countries. Toll prices are actually quite low in this country compared to other countries. Because of these incentives, there isn't much push to actually switch to another mode of transportation. Okay,
so if it seems that the biggest correlation found with a high number of single drivers is the cost of fuel and toll, then how do we, I guess, inculcate a culture of carpooling? How do we, I guess, make it so that this is the norm? So
cost is always the biggest
way
motivator.
The biggest benefit of carpooling would be sharing the cost, splitting the cost, right?
No. Yes, sharing the cost, but the cost I'm talking about is make it too expensive for single riders to go into the town.
How, like a congestion levy?
Congestion charge is crazy, right? We know that London, for instance, and New York has crazy congestion charges. Sydney, in the CBD area, has terrible congestion charges, particularly if you have, a single rider. In Jakarta, they applied that particular congestion charge, but we now know that that there is a rig to that system, and we can talk more about that very shortly.
Yeah, all right. We're going to come back and continue our look on the transportation industry with a look at some of the challenges of being a driver here in Malaysia, especially on the highways. Stay tuned to consider this.